The desert stretched wide under a pale red sky. The land was silent, broken only by the sound of dry winds carrying dust and whispers. In the middle of that wasteland lay a young alien girl, her body weak, her breath shallow, her eyes half closed. Her people had called her broken. They said she was a shame to the tribe, a curse to their honor. Her left leg was twisted since birth. Her skin carried strange marks and her voice was softer than the others. To them, weakness was not allowed. Imperfection was not forgiven. So they took her to the edge of the desert and left her to die. No tears were shed, no prayers were spoken. Only silence as they turned their backs and walked away. The girl had no name, not anymore. Her name was stripped from her when they branded her broken. For days she lay under the cruel sun, her throat burning, her body trembling, her heart heavy with despair each moment. She wondered why she had even been born, why the stars allowed her to exist only to suffer. The sand burned her skin, the nights froze her bones, and still she clung weakly to life. Her eyes looked at the endless sky, waiting for the end that never came. Then one day the silence was broken. A deep hum rolled across the desert as a shadow passed over her. She blinked weakly and saw something strange, something she had never seen before. It was a ship, silver and black, its engines glowing blue. It descended slowly, dust swirling around it as it landed not far from where she lay. Her people had always told her humans were dangerous, loud and strange. She had never believed she would see one. Now, as the ship's ramp opened, she saw a figure step out, tall, broad, covered in strange armor. The light of the alien sun glowed against his helmet as he walked closer. Fear gripped her heart. Was this the end after all? A crueler end than the desert? Would the human finish what her own kind had started? She tried to turn away, but her body was too weak. She closed her eyes, waiting, expecting pain. Instead, she felt a shadow fall over her, blocking the burning sun. A voice spoke, deep yet gentle. "Are you alive?" Her eyes opened, and she saw the human kneeling beside her. His face now visible through his helmet glass, his eyes were strange, brown, warm, filled with something she had never seen before. Concern. He reached into a pack and pulled out a small container. Cool water spilled into a cup, and he pressed it to her lips. She trembled, unsure, but her dry throat forced her to drink. The water slid down, sweet and life-giving, and tears filled her eyes. No one had ever given her anything before. Not food, not kindness, not care. The human said nothing at first, only watched as she drank slowly. His hand steady when she coughed. He gently lifted her head, supporting her like she mattered. Like she was not broken, but something worth saving, the girl whispered weakly. "Why?" Her voice cracked, almost lost in the wind. The human tilted his head, confused. "Why what? Why help me?" she asked, her words full of disbelief. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Because you're alive." The words struck her like lightning. Because you're alive. No one had ever said those words to her before. Her people had said she was worthless, broken, a mistake, but this human who did not know her, who owed her nothing, saw her as alive, and that was enough for him. He lifted her into his arms. Strong but careful, she gasped, unused to being touched without cruelty. Her heart pounded as he carried her toward the ship. The desert stretched behind her, wide and empty, but for the first time, she felt it no longer owned her. Her people had abandoned her to death. But fate had brought someone else. Someone unexpected. The ramp closed behind them. The engines rumbled and the ship lifted into the air. The girl pressed weakly against his chest, her eyes closing, her body giving in to sleep. But before she drifted away, she whispered one word, a word she had not spoken in years. "Please." The human looked down at her fragile form and answered softly, "You'll be safe now." As the ship broke through the clouds and the desert disappeared below, the girl felt something strange in her heart. It was not fear, not despair, but something she had thought she would never feel again. Hope. The girl they called broken was not gone yet. Her story was only beginning. The hum of the engines filled the small ship as it rose higher into the sky. The alien girl, weak and trembling, lay on a narrow bed inside the cabin, her eyes opening and closing slowly. The human moved carefully around her, setting down his pack, opening containers, preparing things she did not understand. To her, every sound felt strange, every movement filled with mystery. She was used to silence, to loneliness, to cruel voices that told her she was nothing. Now there was only the steady sound of machines and the quiet steps of the human who had lifted her from the sand. She watched him with half-lidded eyes, expecting the trick to reveal itself. Surely he would ask something cruel, demand something in return, laugh at her weakness. That was what kindness had always meant among her people. An illusion, followed by punishment. Her cracked lips trembled as she whispered, "Why didn't you leave me?" The human looked over his shoulder, his brown eyes soft. "Because no one deserves to die alone." The words struck her heart, confusing her, shaking her. She turned her face away. Ashamed of the tears that burned her eyes, he knelt beside her bed and offered another small cup of water. Her hands shook as she reached, but before she could grasp it, he steadied her fingers with his own. She flinched at the touch, expecting pain, but none came. Instead, his grip was gentle, steady, warm. "Drink slowly," he said, guiding the cup to her lips. The water slid down her throat, easing the fire within her, and for a moment, she closed her eyes and let herself feel the relief. It was such a simple act, giving water to the thirsty, but to her it was more than that. It was proof that someone saw her not as broken, not as cursed, but as alive. When she finished, he placed a blanket over her thin body. The softness startled her. She had never felt such warmth before. Her people had given her nothing but rags. She pulled the blanket close, almost hiding her face inside it. The human gave a small smile, noticing her small comfort, but he said nothing. Instead, he moved to the console and pressed a few buttons. The ship adjusted course, heading into the wide stars, leaving the desert world behind. The girl's eyes followed him, filled with fear and suspicion. Are you taking me back to them?" she asked weakly. Her voice trembled, expecting betrayal. The human turned, his expression firm. "No," he said, shaking his head. Then why save me?" she whispered again. He sat down beside her, resting his elbows on his knees, thinking. Finally, he answered, "Because you're worth saving." She blinked, her heart tightening, not believing his words. Her people had said she was worth less than the dust beneath their feet. But here was a human, someone from another world, saying the opposite. Her eyes burned as memories rushed back, voices calling her broken, hands pushing her away. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but her body was too tired, too weak to fight. She turned her face into the blanket, whispering, "I'm not worth anything." The human leaned closer, his voice low, steady. "That's a lie they made you believe." She looked at him, startled. "What?" "They were wrong," he said simply. "You are alive, and that alone makes you worth more than they ever saw." His words stayed with her long after he stood and began working again. She lay still, her body wrapped in the blanket, her mind swirling. The ship hummed as it cut through the atmosphere, stars glittering outside the small window beside her. For the first time, she felt something stir in her chest. Doubt, yes, but also a spark of something else, hope. It frightened her more than despair, because hope could break her again. The human returned, this time with a small piece of food, something soft and warm. He held it out to her. "Eat." She shook her head. No. Her people had often given her rotten scraps, tricking her, mocking her when she grew sick. She thought this was the same, but the human did not push. He only took a small bite himself, chewing slowly, then set the rest near her. "Safe," he said, his voice calm. "You can trust this." She watched him for a long time, her chest heavy. Then with trembling fingers she reached and took a piece. The flavor was strange, rich, nothing like the sour scraps she had known. Tears spilled from her eyes as she swallowed. The taste of real food given without cruelty was almost too much to bear. The human did not mock her, did not laugh, did not turn away. He simply sat near, giving her space, letting her eat slowly. Every small act was a kindness she could not understand. Why would a human, a stranger care for her when her own kind did not. As the ship drifted through space, her thoughts circled like restless birds. At last, her weak voice broke the silence. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly, his eyes kind. "My name is Elias." She whispered the name, strange on her tongue, human and strong. It felt real, grounding, like a promise she could hold on to. That night, wrapped in the blanket, her stomach warm with food, her throat eased by water, she lay awake. The human had told her she was worth saving, but the voices of her people still echoed in her mind, broken, cursed, worthless. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to block them out, but when she remembered, Elias's steady gaze and the sound of his voice saying, "Because you're alive," the voices grew softer. For the first time in her life, she wondered if they had been wrong. The thought frightened her, yet also filled her with a trembling hope. The desert had left her to die, but kindness had found her. The first touch of kindness she had ever known, and though she could not yet believe it, she felt deep inside that her life would never be the same again. The stars outside the window moved slowly as the ship traveled through the dark sea of space. The girl lay under the soft blanket, her weak body beginning to rest, yet her mind could not be silent. Elias, the human, worked quietly nearby, checking the controls, preparing supplies, moving with calm patience. Every action he made seemed so different from what she had known. Her people had always moved with anger or indifference, never with care, never with thought for her. Now here was a human, giving his time, his strength, his kindness, to someone his world said was not worth saving. When she tried to sit up, her body shook, her leg refusing to hold her weight. She collapsed back with a sharp breath. Shame filling her eyes, she whispered, "See, I am broken." Elias turned at once, kneeling beside her, his voice steady. "No, you are hurt, and hurt can heal." She looked at him, confused. "But this leg, it has never worked." He studied it carefully, his eyes thoughtful, then smiled faintly. "Then we will make it work." The words made no sense to her, yet she could not ignore the certainty in his tone. Over the next days, Elias worked patiently, crafting something strange. He used tools she had never seen, shaping metal and straps into a form that looked like part of a leg. She watched silently, unsure if this was another trick. But his focus never wavered. At last, he held it out to her. "It is a prosthetic," he explained. "It may not be perfect, but it will help you walk." Her heart pounded, fear and hope mixing inside her. Her people had mocked her limp, had called her useless, but this human was giving her a chance to stand. With his steady hands, he helped her fasten it. The metal felt cold at first, heavy against her thin body. She tried to rise, but her legs trembled and she nearly fell. Elias caught her, holding her steady, his voice calm. Slowly, one step at a time, she shook her head, fear filling her chest. "I cannot." "Yes, you can," he said firmly, "not all at once, but step by step." He guided her forward, his arms supporting her as her foot touched the floor. Her body screamed with weakness, her balance wavered, but she moved. One step, then another. The effort brought tears to her eyes. But Elias's steady voice pushed her on. "You are walking," he said softly, and for the first time, she realized he was right. She was walking. Her breath came hard, her body shook, but the impossible was happening. When at last she collapsed into his arms. Exhausted, he lifted her gently back to the bed. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her eyes wet, but her lips trembled with something almost like a smile. "See?" Elias said, his tone warm. "You are not broken. You are learning." The words sank deep into her heart, fighting against the voices of her past. For the first time, she wanted to believe. The days passed, each one filled with small lessons. Elias showed her how to move with the prosthetic, how to balance, how to fall and stand again. He gave her simple tasks, picking up a cup, walking across the cabin, speaking small human words. She stumbled, failed, cried. But every time she wanted to give up, Elias was there. Steady, patient, never mocking. Her people had only ever told her what she could not do. Elias told her what she could. And slowly, painfully, she began to believe him. At night, when the ship grew quiet, Elias would play soft human music. Strange sounds filled the air, rising and falling like voices of stars. The girl listened, her eyes wide, her heart trembling. She had never known such beauty, never thought sound could hold warmth. Music is how humans share their souls, Elias told her one evening. It heals wounds you cannot see. She closed her eyes, letting the notes wrap around her for the first time. Her scars inside felt less heavy. One evening, as she practiced walking from one end of the cabin to the other, she stumbled again. Frustration burst from her lips. Why try? I will always be weak, Elias stepped forward, catching her arm before she fell, his gaze firm. Weakness is not failing. Weakness is refusing to try. The words froze her, piercing the darkness in her mind. She had been told weakness was her nature, her curse. But Elias was telling her it was only a choice she did not have to make. That night she lay awake, staring at the stars outside the window. Her body ached from effort, her legs sore, her throat rough from learning human words, but her heart felt different. She whispered to herself, barely audible, I am not broken. The words shook her, tears filling her eyes. But she did not take them back. For the first time, she wondered if she could be more. Elias, sitting at the console, looked over at her, his eyes catching her in the dim light. You will be more, he said softly, as if hearing her thoughts. The girl turned her face into the blanket, hiding her tears, but a small, fragile smile touched her lips. The journey was far from over, but something inside her had changed. She was no longer only surviving, she was learning to live again. The hum of the ship became a song in her ears, a steady rhythm that no longer frightened her. The alien girl sat near the wide window, her thin hands pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with wonder. Beyond the window stretched a vast ocean of stars, countless lights shining in endless black. Her people had always told her she was too weak to see the world, too broken to belong anywhere, yet here she was, watching whole galaxies drift past, alive, breathing, learning. Elias stood behind her, his arms crossed, his expression calm but warm. He had guided her through walking, through speaking small human words, through eating without fear. Now he was showing her something greater. This, he said softly, pointing to the shining clusters beyond the glass, is the universe. She shook her head slowly, her voice trembling. It is too big, it scares me. Elias walked closer, kneeling beside her, his voice steady. The universe is big, yes, but it is also beautiful. Why beautiful? She whispered. It is cold and empty. He smiled faintly. Because even in the cold and empty, light still shines. His words sank into her heart. Light still shines. She thought of her life. The desert, the cruel voices, the endless nights alone. She had felt like darkness with no stars. And yet Elias had stepped into her life, a light that refused to fade. For the first time, she wondered if she, too, could be a small light. Elias tapped a button on the console, and a gentle sound filled the cabin. Music again, soft and slow, a human song that rose like a river. The girl turned her face toward him, her lips parting. Why do you always play this? Because music reminds us we are not alone, Elias answered. It tells us that even pain can become something beautiful. She listened, the melody washing over her, and a tear slipped down her cheek. No one had ever told her pain could become anything but chains. Yet here she was, feeling her chest lift with something like hope. Later, Elias led her to the back of the ship, where tools and supplies were stored. He placed a small object in her hands, a thin book, its cover worn. What is this? She asked softly. A story, Elias said. Humans write them to remind ourselves that even when life hurts, there's always more to be told. She opened it slowly, tracing the strange human letters with her fingers. I cannot read this, she whispered, ashamed. Elias smiled gently. Then I will teach you. Day by day, he showed her letters, sounds, words. She stumbled, made mistakes, grew frustrated. But Elias never raised his voice, never mocked. Every time she said she could not, he answered, You can, just slower. One evening, she read a single sentence aloud, shaky but clear. Elias clapped his hands once, grinning. See, you are learning. Her chest swelled with pride, a strange warmth filling her. For the first time, she felt not useless, but capable. Still, fear lingered in her heart at night. She dreamed of the voices of her people calling her broken, cursed, worthless. She would wake with her chest tight, her hands shaking. One night, she confessed in a whisper, Even now I hear them. I cannot escape their voices. Elias looked at her, his gaze firm. Then drown their voices with your own. She frowned. Confused, What do you mean? He leaned closer, his tone steady. Speak louder than their lies. Speak your truth even if your voice shakes. The next day, as she practiced walking again, she stumbled and fell hard. Pain shot through her leg, tears filled her eyes, and the voices rushed back, cruel and sharp, broken, worthless, weak. They hissed in her memory. Her chest burned, her lips trembled, but she remembered Elias's words. Speak louder. With shaking breath, she whispered, I am not broken. The words felt small, fragile yet powerful. Elias bent down, helping her stand, his eyes shining. Again, she swallowed. Her voice stronger. I am not broken. Her heart pounded, her tears falling freely, but she felt something shift inside her. The chains of her past were not gone, but cracks had formed. That night she sat once more by the window, the stars endless before her. She thought of the desert, of the hopeless girl left to die. Then she thought of the human who had given her water, food, warmth, music, and now words. She realized the fear that had ruled her life was beginning to weaken. The universe was still vast, still frightening, but no longer empty. For she was not alone, not anymore. Elias came to sit beside her, silent for a long moment. Watching the same stars at last, he said softly,
Fear will always be there, but it does not have to control you. She turned her face toward him,
her eyes shining with tears. Then what controls me? His answer was simple, quiet yet strong. You. The girl pressed her forehead to the glass, her reflection faint against the stars. Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles, fragile but real. For the first time, she believed that maybe she could live without fear. Maybe she could choose her own path. The world beyond fear was waiting, and she was ready to take her first steps toward it. The days aboard the ship became slower, yet brighter for the girl. She learned to walk longer distances. She learned to form human words with her soft voice, and she even laughed sometimes, a sound she never thought her lips could make. Elias watched her progress with quiet pride, never pushing too hard, never pulling away. Every step she took felt like a step away from the desert, away from death, away from the chains of shame. But peace does not last forever, and the voices she had run from were not silent for long. It began when the ship landed on a small outpost to gather supplies. The air smelled of oil and dust, and the port was crowded with traders, travelers and soldiers from many worlds. The girl stayed close behind Elias, her eyes wide, her heart pounding. She had not seen other beings since her tribe abandoned her. Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, guiding her through the crowd. But then across the market she heard it, a sharp voice, familiar, cruel, unforgettable. Broken. Her blood froze. She turned her head, and there they were, figures from her tribe. Tall and proud, their eyes burning with disgust. Her breath caught in her throat, her legs shook, the prosthetic trembling beneath her weight. One of them pointed at her, his voice loud enough for all to hear. She lives. The cursed one lives, and with a human, the crowd murmured, eyes turning, whispers spreading like fire. The girl's chest tightened, shame crashing over her like a storm. Elias stepped in front of her, his expression hard, his voice calm but firm. Stay behind me. The tribe members pushed through the crowd, their words sharp, filled with venom. You should have died in the desert, one hissed. Your weakness shames us all, another sneered at Elias. Human, you do not understand what you carry. She is cursed. She is nothing. She is broken. The girl lowered her head, her heart screaming, their voices cutting deeper than any blade. Every cruel word was a chain pulling her back to the desert. She wanted to curl into herself, to disappear, to give in. Elias did not move, his tall frame shielding her, his eyes like fire. She is not broken, he said coldly. She is alive. And that is enough, the tribe laughed, their cruel voices echoing. You defend her, one mocked. What is she to you, a pet? A mistake you pity? Elias's fists tightened, but his voice stayed steady. She is more than you will ever see, because where you see weakness, I see strength. The girl trembled, tears burning her eyes, her heart torn in two. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to his words, but the weight of her past was too heavy. Her people had cast her out, branded her worthless, and now their voices filled the air again. She could not escape them. One of them stepped forward, his eyes sharp as blades. Give her to us, human. She belongs with her own kind. We will finish what we began. The girl gasped, shaking her head, whispering, no, please. Don't. Elias looked down at her, his expression softening for a brief moment, then turned back to the tribe. No, he said simply, his tone unshakable. The word hung in the air, heavy, final. The crowd around them went silent. Watching, waiting. The tribe members snarled, anger flashing in their eyes. You dare defy us for her, one spat. She is a curse. She will drag you down with her. Elias stepped forward, his body tense, his presence like a wall. She is not a curse. She is a survivor. The girl's heart pounded as she listened, her mind spinning. Why would he fight for her? Why would he stand against them, when even she could not stand against their voices? Her lips trembled, but no words came, only tears spilling silently down her cheeks. The tribe moved closer, circling, their voices rising. Broken, worthless, weak, they chanted, each word striking her like a lash. Her knees buckled, her breath came short, and she clutched at Elias's arm, shaking. I cannot, she whispered, her voice barely there. I cannot fight them. Elias turned his head slightly, his eyes locking onto hers, steady and unshaken. Yes, you can, he said firmly. Not with fists, not with blades, but with your voice. She shook her head violently, fear choking her. They will not listen. They never listen. Then do not speak for them, Elias said, his tone low but fierce. Speak for yourself. The words burned into her mind. Speak for yourself. She had never spoken against them, never lifted her voice when they called her broken. But now, with Elias standing like a shield before her, with the eyes of strangers watching, she felt something stir inside her chest. Her throat trembled, her lips dry, her heart racing. She closed her eyes and whispered, barely louder than the crowd. I am not broken. The voices continued, mocking, cruel, drowning her words. Elias leaned closer, his voice urgent but calm, louder. She drew a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face, and shouted, I am not broken. The market fell silent. The tribe froze, their mocking eyes narrowing. Uncertain, the crowd whispered. But the sound was different now, curious, shocked, questioning. The girl's chest heaved, her body shaking. But her voice had cut through the storm. For the first time she had spoken not as the cursed one, not as the abandoned one, but as herself. Her heart trembled, half in fear, half in something new, power. Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Pride shining in his gaze, the tribe stood in silence, their cruelty unsettled, their certainty cracked. The girl wiped her tears with trembling hands, her voice breaking but strong. I'm alive. I am not yours to destroy. Her words echoed in the quiet market, fragile yet unyielding. For the first time in her life she had answered back, and though fear still clung to her, she felt the chains of their voices weaken, if only a little. The market was frozen in silence. Her voice still echoed in the air, trembling yet strong. I am not broken. For a moment, even the cruel voices of her tribe seemed uncertain, as if her words had carved a crack in their certainty. But pride was a sharp blade, and they would not sheath it so easily. One stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow over her small figure. You dare to speak against us, he snarled. You, the cursed child who shamed our bloodline. The girl flinched, her body trembling, but Elias stepped closer, his hand steady on her shoulder. She has the right to speak, Elias said firmly, his voice like iron. The alien's lip curled. She is nothing, she always was, she always will be. The girl's heart pounded, fear rising again, yet Elias's hand tightened gently, reminding her she was not alone. Around them the crowd whispered, shifting uneasily. Some stared at the girl with pity, some with doubt, but others looked at Elias with cautious respect. A human standing against a tribe for a weak, abandoned girl. That was something rare, something dangerous. The tribe leader spat on the ground, his voice sharp. Human, step aside, this is not your fight. This is our shame to end. Elias did not move, his tall frame unshaken. It is my fight because she is under my protection. The girl's chest tightened, her lips trembling. Elias, she whispered. Afraid, he turned to her, his gaze steady. Do not let them take your voice again. Her tears fell, but she nodded, her fear mixing with a spark of courage. The leader raised his hand, signaling the others. Then we will tear her voice from her throat, and you with it. The crowd gasped, tension rising like a storm. The girl's breath caught, her knees buckled. But Elias stepped in front of her, his stance wide, his eyes unyielding. No, he said simply. You will not touch her. The tribe advanced, their faces twisted with fury. The girl clutched Elias's arm, trembling. They will kill you, she whispered. He looked down at her, his expression calm even in danger. Maybe, but not without teaching them the truth first. The first tribe member lunged, but Elias moved swiftly, blocking him with his arm, pushing him back. The crowd cried out as chaos began to rise. The girl screamed, her voice breaking, but Elias's strength was steady. His training clear, he did not strike to kill, only to defend, each movement precise, protective, unyielding. Her people shouted insults, curses, their words sharp as knives. Broken, cursed, worthless. Her ears rang with them, her heart cracking. But Elias's voice cut through, clear, powerful. You are not broken. She clutched her chest, her breath ragged, her mind a battlefield of voices. All her life she had believed their words. All her life she had been crushed under their weight. But here was Elias, fighting not for himself, but for her. She could not stay silent, not now, not again. Her voice burst out, louder this time, trembling but unbroken. I am not worthless, the tribe froze at her words, their eyes snapping to her. The crowd's whispers grew louder, some nodding, some murmuring in awe. The leader sneered, Your words mean nothing. You are a stain that no voice can wash clean. The girl's tears fell, but her voice rose stronger. I am alive, and that is enough. Elias glanced at her, pride burning in his gaze. The fight slowed as her words echoed. The tribe members hesitated, uncertain, their power shaking under the weight of her courage. The leader's face twisted with rage. You defy us still, he spat. Yes, she said, her body trembling, her voice clear. I defy you. I defy the chains you placed on me. I am not broken. I am whole. Her declaration silenced the air. For the first time, she stood not behind Elias, not hidden in fear, but beside him, her voice loud enough for all to hear. The crowd's eyes widened, some cheering softly, others gasping in disbelief. The tribe leader clenched his fists, but even he could not hide the unease in his gaze. Her words had cut deeper than any weapon. Elias straightened, his presence strong. You see, he said to the tribe, his voice like thunder. She is not your shame. She is your proof that even the weakest among you can survive. Can rise, can speak, the leader growled. But his people shifted uneasily, doubt flickering in their eyes. The girl's tears fell freely, but her lips curved into a fragile smile. For the first time in her life, she had stood against them, not with silence, but with strength. The market erupted in noise, some shouting, some clapping, some arguing. But through it all, the girl felt something new beating in her chest. She had fought, not with fists, not with blades, but with her worth, her voice, her truth, and for the first time, she believed it. She was not broken, she was whole. The marketplace slowly settled after the storm of voices. The girl stood beside Elias, her breath uneven, her legs trembling. But her heart steady. She had spoken, louder than she ever thought she could. And for the first time, her tribe did not know how to answer. The leader glared at her, his pride bleeding from his sharp eyes. You think words change who you are, he spat. She met his gaze, her voice quiet but unshaken. Yes, because words can break and words can heal. And I will not let yours break me anymore. The crowd stirred, whispers running like water. Some aliens looked at her with disbelief, but others nodded slowly, as though a hidden truth had been uncovered. Elias placed a hand gently on her shoulder, not to shield her now, but to stand beside her, equal and strong. The leader hissed in rage, but his people shifted behind him. Their certainty cracked. One woman stepped forward from the tribe, her voice softer, uncertain. She should have been dead, yet she lives. Perhaps she is not cursed, perhaps she is stronger than we knew. The leader turned on her, furious, but the doubt had already spread. The girl saw it in their eyes. The chains of cruelty were not as unbreakable as they had once seemed. Elias leaned closer, whispering for her ears only. You do not need their approval, not anymore. Her chest ached with tears, but she nodded, her voice trembling. I know. For so long she had waited for them to accept her, to call her by her name again, to see her as more than broken. But now she realized she did not need their voices. She had found her own. Elias guided her away, through the crowded port, leaving the tribe in stunned silence. They did not stop her, not this time. Her heart pounded with every step, not from fear, but from freedom. For the first time, she walked away without chains. Back aboard the ship, the engines roared softly, carrying them away from the outpost, away from the tribe, away from the past. The girl sat by the window again, her reflection faint against the sea of stars. Elias brought her water and food, the same kindness he had always shown. But this time, when he placed the cup in her hand, she did not tremble. Her grip was steady, her eyes clear. She had changed for days. She practiced walking more, speaking more, reading the book Elias had given her. Each small victory became a stone in the foundation of her new life. Each failure no longer felt like proof of weakness, but a step toward strength. And Elias was always near, not carrying her now, but walking beside her, guiding, encouraging, reminding her she was more than she believed. One evening, as they traveled through quiet space, Elias found her standing near the control panel, staring at the map of stars. Her voice was soft but steady. "I want to see them. I want to see more than the desert and the places of shame. I want to see the worlds where I can be free." Elias smiled faintly. "Then we will." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of wonder. To dream was something she had never allowed herself before, but now her heart overflowed with it. Later, as she lay under the blanket, she turned to Elias, her voice shaking with emotion. "Why did you save me?" He met her gaze. His answer simple and true. "Because you were alive." And that was enough, she swallowed hard, whispering, "But you did more than save me. You showed me I was whole." The words slipped from her lips before she could stop them, but they were true. Elias's eyes softened, and he gave a small nod. "Then hold on to that. Never forget it." The ship drifted on, carrying them into new stars, new worlds, new beginnings. The girl sat with her hands pressed to the glass, her eyes wide with wonder. Once she had been left to die in the desert, nameless, voiceless, broken. Now she was alive. She was seen, she was heard, and most of all, she was whole. She whispered to herself, her voice soft but certain. "I am not broken," and this time, there was no voice to argue, no shadow to pull her back, only the stars above, endless and bright. Reflecting her new truth, her journey had only begun, but she no longer feared it. She was not a curse, she was not worthless, she was not what they said, she was her own, strong and alive. Elias glanced at her from the console, a faint smile on his lips as he watched her gaze at the stars. For him, she was no longer the girl left to die. She was the proof of why humans believed in second chances, in healing, in light. And for her, he was not just a rescuer. He was the one who had given her the greatest gift. Not survival, but the truth that she was whole. The stars stretched endlessly before them, and she faced them without fear. Her story was no longer about pain or shame. It was about hope, courage, and the light that could be born even in the darkest desert. The girl once called broken was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who would never again bow to cruel voices, someone who was at last whole.